So we continue to dissect the third part of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry report. Rampant corruption within the governing party once again in the spotlight. The report reveals how some ANC deployees got slices of shady multi-billion rand deals backed by the controversial facilities management company Africa Global Operations, formerly known as Bosasa. It will ring a bell for many if I say Bosasa, because that's the former name of that particular company. All right, our reporters Heidi Giokos, Pule Letshwiti-Jones join me now, as well as Bateman, who is out at Luthuli House. And I think let's start with you, Heidi. The State Capture report, you've been going through it, of course, and particularly focusing on Bosasa. How far have you gone in wading through the voluminous report?
Why do you want to expose me like this? It's been really tough covering this particular
You're reading
part.
For understanding and extracting.
Exactly, and also just trying to remember back, because a lot was mentioned during the State Capture Inquiry Commission, and of course just trying to put the puzzle together. So I've tried to get as far as possible, but I'm focusing on the entities, whereas Pule is focusing on the individuals. So we're trying to share the load.
Fantastic. So let's start with an update, though, from Barry Bateman, coming out of the ANC's National Working Committee. So, Barry, the report is out, and like everyone else, we are all still wading through it and basically, picking out the details of what transpired in relation to Bosasa, but also the South African Post Office, as well as dealings in the Free State. The initial reaction from the ANC, what are they saying? They are heavily implicated, at least in as far as Bosasa is concerned, in that Bosasa believed that, their modus operandi involved keeping the ANC in power so that the ANC can continue to appoint, deployees who would do Bosasa's bidding.
Yeah, very big questions for the ANC to Lasizwe, but very few answers coming from the governing party. You talk about that reporter, and I put the question to Pule Mabe about, you've got your former Secretary General who's been implicated in very serious corruption. We've of course heard from Gwede Matashe and his position on it. Well, my question was to the party. This has come out now, it's volume 3. What position are you adopting? And this is what Pule Mabe had to say, and it's something you've probably heard before. Take a listen.
Russia and Ukraine. The NWC expressed deep concern regarding the escalation of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It reaffirmed the ANC's conviction that international relations should be underpinned by a commitment to development, democracy, human rights, peace and security, in line with the clarion call by the Freedom Charter that there shall be peace and friendship. It expressed its abhorrence at the suffering caused to ordinary people in every country that is involved, either directly or indirectly, in this conflict, and called upon progressive formations globally to ensure that any harm to civilians invites appropriate repercussions in line with the values of a humane, just, equitable, democratic and free world. Reports get to be issued now and then. Now you're talking about the Zondo Commission's report, volume 3. In our last NEC, we took a decision that we will have to establish a body within the National Executive Committee that has got the necessary expertise to be able to guide our overall organizational response to what is coming out. But it will be difficult for the ANC, even without studying the reports fully, just as they drop immediately. We want to have formulated an opinion there and there. The ANC will need the space to study all of this, allow the work that is going to be done by its very structures that it is setting up to look at this. And if the ANC deems it fit to invite cadres that might have been mentioned in some of those reports so that they could provide the organization with some clarity of sort, the organization then activates that. So we should look at it like that. I mean, these things need to be studied. There are legal implications. Some of our leaders, including our national chair, have already expressed the actions that they want to be taking, which actions are provided for in law to subject such report into judicial review. Because now what it does is that it makes matters of dealing with their merits and demerits sub judice once they enter that kind of a terrain, especially from ourselves as an organization.
So Pule Letshwiti-Jones, your namesake, Pule Mabe, says, understandably, it will take time to wade through the whole document and formulate positions of the ANC. But one person who has formulated a position is the ANC's national chairperson, former Secretary General Gwede Mantashe.
Politically, Gwede is playing the long game here, understanding that, taking the report on parts of the report on review, which within he's implicated, could take some time before that accountability process is taking place. I had just spoken to some of the officials within the ANC's Integrity Commission who say that they're yet to receive the mandate to actually look and start summoning some of the officials within the party. Yesterday, Gwede had also mentioned that he hadn't received a letter from the Integrity Commission. But while what's the case, what's important is the element of which Pule says that will be establishing a body within the ANC to look thoroughly within the report to see how some of the key ANC officials then were implicated and as to what may be the way forward thereof to actually ensure that there's accountability. But furthermore, what we understand is, as we call people within the ANC and ANC officials, is that there's that option of the renewal committee as well, which may be headed by the former president, Thabo Mbeki, as to trying to renew the organization and see what are some of the things that have been hampering the party from progressing forward, such as corruption, such as the report we've seen, and amongst other issues.
Sure. And Heidi, before we get to the whole issue of recommendations, you've been looking at institutions that are implicated, right? Some of them are state-owned enterprises, but others are organs of state in the sense that, there'll be institutions, there'll also be government department. DCS is one of those that come up in as far as Bosasa is concerned. What picture emerges when you look at, those entities coming into play?
So what we're finding in the state capture reports is that certain entities were targeted, such as, or departments as well, such as the Department of Correctional Services, Airports Company South Africa, the South African Post Office, certain government entities within the Northwest Province, such as youth centres, for example. So what we do understand is that these entities awarded tenders to Bosasa without following proper processes and the tender processes that one company would ordinarily have to go through to get these millions, in some cases billions of rands worth of contracts and tenders. And what was found here is that Angelo Agrizzi, who was part of Bosasa, made it very clear, and this is what you're seeing in the state capture reports, that it was made very clear that from the beginning it was almost as though the CEO of the time, Gavin Watson, had identified certain entities, had identified certain government officials to say, we want those tenders and we want them to be part of Bosasa, and here is a bribe, here is a very expensive watch, here is a very expensive gift, such as furnishing your house, building a house for you. So it was very clear what the mandate of Bosasa was, and I'm not sure if we can get into some of the recommendations. There's a very long list of what some of the recommendations are. We've actually put a graphic in.
I think let's pause for a moment and come back for the recommendations. And the reason I pause you is I'd like us to bring in Professor Sipho Seepe into the conversation. Prof. Seepe, this report coming at the time that it does, at the moment in a year of the ANC's elective conference, and already the wheels are already moving towards that in terms of the various processes within the various structures of the ANC. Is this the ripping of the plaster that was needed, or is this, a mortal wound, as it were, to the ANC going towards its elective conference, but also further on towards elections in 2024?
Well, from the perspective of the electorate, it is, or it might prove to be a mortal wound. But what would be of concern to people is how the ANC responds to this. And what the posture that the ANC has taken is a much more measured, but also a posture that gives them time to respond to it in a manner that does not destroy the organization. Professor Mantashe jumped the gun, because when you read the report and also the part that he read to the press yesterday, it indicates or suggests that there should be further investigation that may lead to what you may call a case against him to answer. But the people who know how government works and also know to the House and especially under Mantashe. Mantashe was a very powerful Secretary General. One remembers that even when the party had to take a position on motions in Parliament, Mantashe would go down there, almost instruct or persuade members of the ANC about what position they must take as MPs. The Letshwiti House could also summon ministers. So the issue here is, how do you explain? Because when you talk about corruption, you must talk about the bribery, you must also talk about kickbacks. So here you have somebody who has benefited and has not said he has not benefited in the sense that somebody decided to do the upgrades in his houses or his dwellings. So the issue here in the court will be to show that there is a direct link between his sphere of influence and influence to the benefits that he has derived. So the position that he has taken is to jump first. But the ANC's position is, let's check so that whatever decision we take, it should not boomerang. Remember, once the party takes a position like it did with Jacob Zuma, when he was removed on the basis of comments that were made that were unfavorable in court. Later, when the comments were made against Mbeki, the party said, if we could take that position and remove somebody because of comments that were unfavorable in court, so should this one. So the party has learned that you don't jump, you must actually study, and this is a posture that they are taking.
In fact, Prof. Seepe, let's bring in Pule Letshwiti-Jones talking about that posture that has been taken by Gwede Mantashe in relation to this matter. Prof. Seepe says he has jumped the gun. I'm not sure, what his exact posture is. Are you waiting for those further investigations that are being recommended that may reveal a prima facie case against you, or are you taking the report on review as we speak now, such that by the time you are done, if you are successful in that process, there's not even a reason for you to worry about any further investigations, because naturally those would have fallen off?
Well, Gwede Mantashe is of the view that the Commission has made assumptions out of facts, or rather assumptions that try to convert them into facts. He says that there isn't any prima facie evidence to substantiate the allegations that have been made about him. But furthermore, saying that he will be taking a part of the report on, review to highlight how he stands, that he is right and hasn't done any wrongdoing. He does not deny, though, having had a relationship with the former CEO and, of course, director of Bosasa, Shabane, who, of course, was one of those who led the process of having CCTV cameras installed in his 3 homes in the Eastern Cape and Johannesburg. But while that's the case, Mantashe is also saying that there isn't any much more substantive evidence to back up what the Commission has against him. But yesterday, throughout the process, I just want you to listen to what he had to say about his legal team now having to intervene and ensure that the process of listening to his sides of facts are heard by the public.
The ANC has set up a committee to process the report, and I will subject myself to that process. But I want to refer you to only one clause in the report, which refers this me for investigation. It says there is a reasonable prospect that further investigation will uncover prima facie case against Mantashe. Basically, there is no prima facie case at this point in time. And the Commission says maybe further investigation will actually uncover such a prima facie case. So that is why it should be taken for review.
So, Heidi, naturally, there are a lot of recommendations to be made, right? And as far as managing the tender processes, it's been a similar process even before with the first 2 parts of this report and the multiple volumes that are already out, because we've always got to remember between a part and volumes that it comes with. What are some of the key recommendations that jump out at you from this latest part?
Well, because, Tulas, there are different parts of this report and it's over 1,000 pages, I think what's important to highlight, and we've actually put a graphic just for people to understand, there are definitely more recommendations with regards to possible prosecution. But I think what's important here is that the National Prosecuting Authority has, the State Capture report says that the National Prosecuting Authority should consider prosecuting for corruption 14 Bosasa officials, airports companies, South African Post Office officials, Department of Correctional Services, 2 Northwest Departments of Social Service officials. It goes on to also speak about how there should be possible prosecution for corruption against Mineral Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe. That's in the next slide. We also do know a possible prosecution against PRASA procurement head, ANC MP Vincent Smith, who's actually in court at the moment, KwaZulu-Natal Prisons Commissioner. So all of these people have been integral in terms of allowing these tender processes to be granted to Bosasa. We also do know that there has been a recommendation for the NPA to consider prosecution for corruption against the former President Jacob Zuma, former Minister Nomvula Mokonyane, former SA Chairperson Dudu Myeni. And this is crucial in terms of actually understanding how far and wide these contracts were awarded and who allowed this. And I think what's important is that the report also speaks about how it wasn't just one specific individual that was targeted or bribed or targeted to say, please give us this contract or please give us this tender process. It went far and very wide. And this is why the report says perhaps the National Prosecuting Authority should further investigate and further look at prosecuting for corruption. And this is possibly why, to Pule's point and what Pule has been covering, why the Minister of Energy, Gwede Mantashe, is saying, I want to take this on review, because the report clearly says that the NPA should further investigate and consider prosecuting for corruption.
Sure, that's an interesting one. And Professor Seepe, from the perspective of the ANC, what's the likelihood that it's almost a given, I don't know, I imagine from my side, that this is likely to be looked at through the various factional lenses, with the result that the organization itself will basically be hamstrung in terms of how it responds? And I guess, it will be up to the president and as leader of the executive to see how emboldened he feels in terms of, following through on the various areas that are within his domain to implement, as he said, much later on in the year, once he has received all the installments of the report. But I imagine that in terms of the ANC itself, this is likely to be looked at through factional lenses.
There's no doubt about that. That's why the president was actually saying, give me time, because as a president, you must also look at what are the implications and ramifications of any decision that you take. But also we know that this is also the elective year of the ANC. And the president has also been heard to say the unity of the ANC to him is very important. So you need to check whether he's going to be able to walk the talk. There are issues of law, but there's issues of morality. The position that was taken by Gwede Mantashe was also about the justification why he must remain in the position as a minister. Because what he's arguing also is, because I've not been charged and because there's not been a case in law that has been made against me, that will lead to charging. Instead, what we have are possible, which means that it is also possible that there may not be such what you call prosecution against him. So he's trying to justify why he should actually remain in the position. But the voters don't vote on the basis only of what the courts have said. They also are saying, are you walking the talk? And what about the moral judgment that may come to be? So those are the major considerations that the president will look into. But also remember, the same president had also said that the ANC is accused number one. And if you read also what the judge, the acting chief justice was also saying that the ANC was also a beneficiary. So the kickbacks, that the money that the ANC was also getting for its own election machinery, could also be suggestive of that the party itself cannot pretend that he was not aware of this. When you have a member of the party bringing money to an entity that is considered to be corrupt or that followed a corrupt business model and the party benefited, what it means that the party has benefited from the proceeds of a crime.
Yeah, lastly, Prof. Seepe, let me end it with you and ask you about former President Jacob Zuma. He's amongst those people against whom findings are being made and recommendations being made in the report. But I'm not seeing that has led to a major story developing. It's almost as if there's a sense in which this was expected, was it not? Given the allegations, the nature of the allegations that had been made against him, given the terms of reference that some of them spoke specifically about him to say, look into his conduct specifically, but also given the fact that any opportunity that he had to have his side of the story heard and to even cross-examine some of the witnesses that were implicating him, he basically, let it slide and didn't take that opportunity.
Well, I think if you look at what Gwede has done, he is actually doing many members of the ANC a favor, and some of them are counting on his position, that if Zondo could be found to be wanting in terms of how he has come about in terms of, with regard to the recommendations, and also his language of further investigations. So they are simply counting on that. So whether by taking the posture that is taken, many of the people who are implicated are waiting to see what's going to happen. And remember, if it can be found in one instance that the acting Chief Justice has erred in his approach, it collapses many of the positions that he has taken. But ultimately, it is not so much what he says. It's really what the NPA can find, what the SIU can find, that will make it possible for the prosecution to occur. In the same way that the NPA did not wait to prosecute Vincent Smith. The SIU had already done work. And remember, when the SIU does work, it has also invasive capabilities of getting records rather than simply listening to the witnesses. Remember, the witnesses that appeared before Zondo, and even as Zondo says, the former president did not come to present his case. You don't say because somebody has not presented this case, what was said about the person is true. Ultimately, a case must be made by the state, and then the matter must be taken to court. So I think that Gwede is going to end up being a hero on this matter to say, take this man on, and let's see if he has arrived at it in a manner that one will say a sober judge will do.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time, Professor Sipho Seepe. Of course, on matters of evidence, the Commission of Inquiry works quite differently from a court of law in as far as a criminal matter is concerned. But your point is well made and well taken. Professor Sipho Seepe, they're weighing in. Pule Letshwiti-Jones, as well as eNCA's Heidi Giokos. Earlier on, we were joined by Bateman from Luthuli House. And just for the sake of completion, it is worth noting that former President Jacob Zuma says he rejects the findings and basically says they are not even worth the paper that they are written on. And as Prof. Seepe was talking there, it appears there's going to be a labyrinth of litigation in the coming months because, as you know, former President Jacob Zuma is not even at this point talking about the reports. He's still back where acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo refused to recuse himself, for the purposes of hearing the evidence of former President Jacob Zuma. He still has that process going on and basically makes allusion to it in his statement, saying that it's an active matter before the courts.